Just when I thought I knew everything, a new secret came out. Our old family friend was involved in the lies, too.
You're imagining things!
The truth couldn't stay hidden anymore.
When I saw the photo, my daughter-in-law with another man smiling in a different city, I felt my blood run cold. One phone call split my life into before and after.
My son, the pilot, saw his wife on his own flight, traveling under a different name, hiding just a few rows from the cockpit.
I will never forget the moment my phone rang that evening. It was one of those calls that splits your life into before and after. I was just settling in with a cup of tea, the house quiet except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. When I saw my son's name flash across the screen, I smiled, expecting a quick check-in from whatever city he'd landed in this time. But the second I answered, I knew something was terribly wrong. His voice was shaking, raw with emotion I'd never heard from him before, not even as a child. "Mom," he choked out, and I could hear the muffled sounds of an airport in the background. I don't know what to do. She's here. She's on my flight, not at home like she said. For a moment, I couldn't process his words. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. His wife, my daughter-in-law, was supposed to be home, texting him sweet messages about missing him, sending photos of their dog curled up on the couch. But now my son was telling me he'd seen her, on his own flight, under a different name, sitting just a few rows behind the cockpit. The shock hit me like a wave, cold and paralyzing. I tried to steady my voice to be the calm anchor he needed. "Are you sure, sweetheart? Maybe it's someone who just looks like her." But he was certain. He'd seen her face, the way she ducked her head when she realized he was the pilot. He'd even checked the manifest. She was traveling under a name he didn't recognize. My heart pounded as I listened to him struggle to hold back tears. I wanted to reach through the phone and hold him, to make sense of this nightmare. Questions swirled in my mind, each one darker than the last. Why would she lie? What was she hiding? And what was I supposed to say to my son, whose world was suddenly spinning out of control? As I tried to comfort him, a cold dread settled in my chest. I knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. If you had asked me just a few months ago, I would have told you that my family was the picture of happiness. We weren't wealthy or famous, but we had something I thought was even more precious: love, trust, and a sense of togetherness that I cherished with every fiber of my being. Our home was always filled with laughter, especially on Sundays, when my son and his wife would come over for dinner. I can still hear the echo of their voices in the kitchen, the clatter of dishes, the teasing and inside jokes that made our little world feel safe and whole. My son, Daniel, was my pride and joy. From the moment he was born, I felt a bond with him that only deepened as he grew. He was the kind of child who would bring me wildflowers from the yard, who'd sit with me on the porch and talk about his dreams. When he announced he wanted to be a pilot, I worried, of course. What mother wouldn't? But I also saw the fire in his eyes, the determination that had always set him apart. Watching him graduate flight school, seeing him in his crisp uniform for the first time, I thought my heart would burst with pride. And then there was Emily. She swept into Daniel's life like a fresh breeze, full of energy and warmth. I remember the first time he brought her home, how she charmed us all with her easy smile and thoughtful questions. She seemed genuinely interested in our family, eager to help in the kitchen, quick to laugh at my husband's corny jokes. I welcomed her with open arms, grateful that my son had found someone who made him so visibly happy. Those early years were golden. Daniel and Emily were inseparable, always planning little getaways or surprising each other with small acts of kindness. They'd show up at our door with homemade bread or a new board game, and we'd spend hours around the table talking about everything and nothing. I trusted Emily completely. She confided in me about her work, her hopes for the future, even her worries about starting a family of her own. I felt lucky. Not every mother-in-law gets to call her daughter-in-law a friend. Looking back now, I realize how much I took for granted. I believed in the story we were living, the one where love conquers all and family is forever. I never imagined that beneath the surface, cracks could be forming tiny fissures I was too blinded by happiness to see. The contrast between those sunlit days and the cold suspicion now gnawing at my heart is almost too much to bear. As I sat in my quiet living room, the memory of those perfect Sundays felt like a cruel joke. How could everything have changed so quickly? How could the woman I welcomed into my family, the one I trusted with my son's heart, be capable of such deception? The questions pressed in on me, heavy and relentless, and I found myself longing for the innocence of those days before doubt crept in, before trust was shattered. But there was no going back. The world I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a chilling uncertainty. And as much as I wanted to cling to the past, I knew I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Looking back, I can see the signs were there, scattered like breadcrumbs I refused to follow. At the time, they seemed so small, so easy to explain away. But now every memory feels sharper, every detail more suspicious, as if my mind is determined to piece together a puzzle I never wanted to solve. It started with the phone calls. Emily had always been close to her friends, but suddenly she was stepping out onto the porch to take calls in hushed tones, her voice barely more than a whisper. If I happened to walk by, she'd end the conversation abruptly or change the subject, flashing me a quick, nervous smile. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was planning a surprise for Daniel. Or maybe she just needed a little privacy. After all, who doesn't? Then there were the absences. Emily's job had always kept her busy, but lately her schedule seemed to shift in unpredictable ways. She'd mention last-minute meetings or work dinners that stretched late into the night. Sometimes she'd come home with a vague explanation and a tired look in her eyes, brushing off my questions with a quick kiss on Daniel's cheek. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that she was just working hard, building a future with my son. But the distance between them grew, almost imperceptibly at first. Daniel would call me, his voice a little more strained than usual, asking if I'd seen Emily or if she'd mentioned any plans. Withholding some of that energy creates the space for roots to grow, not the forced weight of your pursuit, that they'd find their way back to each other. I didn't want to meddle. I didn't want to be the mother-in-law who sowed seeds of doubt where there should be trust. Still, the little things piled up. Emily stopped joining us for Sunday dinners as often, always with a polite excuse. She forgot birthdays, missed family gatherings, and when she did show up, she seemed distracted, her eyes darting to her phone every few minutes. I remember one evening in particular, Daniel had made her favorite meal, hoping to cheer her up after a long week. She barely touched her plate, claiming she wasn't hungry, and spent most of the night scrolling through her messages. I caught Daniel watching her, a flicker of hurt crossing his face before he forced a smile. I tried to talk myself out of my worries. I told myself that Emily was just stressed, that Daniel was overthinking things, that I was reading too much into every little change. I wanted so badly for them to be happy, for our family to stay whole, so I pushed my doubts aside, burying them under layers of hope and denial. But denial can only hold back the truth for so long. That night, after Daniel's call, I sat in the dark, replaying every moment in my mind. The way Emily had started locking her phone, the sudden weekend trips to visit her sister, the new perfume she wore that Daniel said he'd never smelled before. Each memory felt like a warning I'd ignored, a chance to ask questions I'd been too afraid to voice. As I sat there, my phone buzzed again. It was Daniel, his voice even shakier than before. "Mom, there's something else," he whispered, as if afraid someone might overhear. She wasn't alone. She was sitting with a man. They looked close, too close. My heart dropped. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was listen as my son's world unraveled in real time. The pain in his voice was almost unbearable, and I felt powerless, caught between the urge to protect him and the fear of what we might discover. I clung to the hope that there was some innocent explanation, some detail we were missing, but deep down, I knew the seeds of doubt had already taken root, and nothing would ever be the same. As Daniel's voice faded into silence, I realized we were standing on the edge of a truth that could destroy us all. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions and worst-case scenarios. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face so vulnerable, so lost. I knew I couldn't just sit back and wait for the truth to reveal itself. I had to do something. I had to protect my son, even if it meant stepping into uncomfortable territory. I started with the obvious: social media. Emily had always been active online, sharing photos of her meals, her outfits, little snippets of her day. But as I scrolled through her profiles, I noticed a change. Her posts had become less frequent, more curated. The comments were filled with acquaintances and coworkers, but there was a new name that kept popping up. A man named Alex. I clicked on his profile, my heart pounding. He was handsome, about Emily's age, and his photos were full of group outings, work events, and the occasional candid shot of Emily laughing at something just out of frame. I tried to tell myself it was innocent. Maybe he was just a friend from work. But the more I looked, the more uneasy I felt. There were inside jokes in the comments, emojis that felt a little too familiar, and a handful of photos where Emily and Alex stood just a bit too close. I scrolled back through the months, looking for patterns, and noticed that Emily's work trips often coincided with Alex's travel posts. My stomach twisted with dread. I decided to reach out to a few of Emily's friends' women I'd met at her bridal shower, women who had once seemed eager to include me in their circle. I sent polite messages, asking if they'd seen Emily lately, if she'd mentioned anything about her recent travels. Most replied with vague answers, but one, Sarah, hesitated before responding. "I'm not sure what's going on." She wrote, "But Emily's been different lately, distant. She doesn't talk about Daniel much anymore." That was all I needed to hear. My fear was quickly being replaced by a cold, determined resolve. I wasn't just a mother-in-law anymore. I was a mother on a mission. I started piecing together Emily's recent activities, referencing her social media posts with Daniel's flight schedule, looking for overlaps and inconsistencies. It was tedious, and I felt a pang of guilt for prying, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I even checked our family group chat, scrolling back through months of messages. Emily's replies had become shorter, less enthusiastic. She'd stopped sending photos, stopped asking about our lives. It was as if she was slowly erasing herself from our family, one message at a time. The more I uncovered, the more my fear grew. What if Daniel was right? What if Emily was living a double life, hiding secrets that could shatter our family? I tried to remind myself of the woman I'd welcomed into my home, the woman who had once called me Mom. But every new piece of evidence chipped away at my hope. Then, just as I was about to give up for the night, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. On Alex's Instagram, there was a photo posted just hours before Daniel's flight. A photo of Emily, unmistakably her, standing in front of a coffee shop in Chicago. She was smiling, her arm linked with Alex's, both of them looking relaxed and happy. The caption read, "Best company for a quick getaway." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Emily had told Daniel she was working from home that day, that she'd be waiting for him to call after his flight landed. But here she was, in another city, with another man, just hours before she boarded Daniel's plane under a false name. The shock was overwhelming. I felt a wave of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak all at once. How could she do this to Daniel? How could she lie so easily, so convincingly? I wanted to scream, to throw my phone across the room, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to think clearly. I needed to figure out what to do next. As I sat there, staring at the photo, I realized there was no turning back. The truth was out there, and I was the only one who could bring it to light. My fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of my resolve, but it was no longer in control. I was determined to protect my son, no matter what it took. And as the first light of dawn crept through the window, I knew that everything was about to change. I spent the entire morning rehearsing what I would say, but nothing could have prepared me for the moment I finally stood face with Emily. My hands shook as I dialed her number, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the ring. When she answered, her voice was as bright and casual as ever, as if nothing in the world was amiss. "Hi, Mom, everything okay?" she chirped, and for a split second, I almost lost my nerve. But the image of her arm linked with Alex's, the memory of Daniel's broken voice, steeled my resolve. "Emily, I need to see you now. Please come over," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. She arrived an hour later, breezing through the door with a practiced smile and a box of pastries, as if she could sweeten the air between us. I watched her set the box on the counter, her movements too controlled, too careful. I wondered how many times she'd lied to my face, how many secrets she'd hidden behind that easy charm. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence stretching between us like a taut wire. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. "Emily, I know you weren't home yesterday. I know you were in Chicago, and I know you were on Daniel's flight, using a different name." For a moment, her face was unreadable. Then she laughed, a short, brittle sound. "What are you talking about? I was home all day. Maybe you're confused." I slid my phone across the table, the photo of her and Alex in Chicago glowing on the screen. "Don't lie to me, Emily. I saw this. Daniel saw you on his flight. Why are you doing this?" Her eyes narrowed, the mask slipping. "Are you spying on me now? Checking up on my every move? This is insane, Mom. You're making something out of nothing." I felt my anger flare. "Nothing. You lied to Daniel. You lied to all of us. Who is Alex? Why were you traveling under a different name?" She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You have no right to interrogate me. This is between me and Daniel. You're always meddling, always trying to control everything. Maybe if you gave us some space, we wouldn't have these problems." Her words stung, but I refused to back down. "I'm not meddling, Emily. I'm protecting my son. He deserves the truth." She scoffed, crossing her arms. "The truth? You wouldn't know the truth if it hit you in the face. You're just jealous that Daniel has someone else in his life now. You can't stand not being the center of his world." The accusation hit me like a slap. For a moment I faltered, doubt creeping in. Was I overstepping? Was I letting my own fears cloud my judgment? But then I remembered Daniel's voice, the pain and confusion, and I knew I couldn't let this go. Just then, the front door opened, and Daniel walked in, his face pale and drawn. He looked from me to Emily, sensing the tension immediately. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily turned to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Your mother is accusing me of all sorts of things. She's been spying on me, Daniel. She doesn't trust me. She never has." Daniel looked at me, searching my face for answers. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Daniel, I'm only trying to help. I saw the photo. I know she wasn't where she said she'd be." He ran a hand through his hair, torn between us. "Emily, just tell me the truth. Please, I need to know." Emily's expression hardened. "There's nothing to tell. Your mother is just trying to turn you against me. She's always been like this." The room felt like it was closing in on me. Years of family dinners, holidays, laughter. All of it seemed to hang in the balance. I could see the pain in Daniel's eyes, the way he was being pulled in two directions. I wanted to reach out to him, to hold him and make it all go away, but I knew I couldn't fix this for him. The argument spiraled, voices rising, old wounds resurfacing. Emily accused me of never accepting her, of always judging her. I accused her of lying, of betraying Daniel's trust. Daniel begged us to stop, his voice cracking with emotion. In that moment, our family felt irreparably broken, the foundation we'd built together crumbling beneath us. Finally, Emily grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Daniel sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I reached out, but he pulled away, his shoulders shaking. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he whispered. I sat there in the silence, questioning everything. Had I gone too far? Was I seeing things that weren't there? The doubt gnawed at me, threatening to unravel my resolve. Just as I was about to give in to despair, my phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. My hands trembled as I opened it. The message was short, but it sent a chill down my spine. "You don't know the whole story. Meet me tomorrow. I have proof." My breath caught. There was something deeper, something I hadn't uncovered yet, and suddenly I knew I couldn't stop now. The truth was out there, and I was closer than ever to finding it. I barely slept that night, my mind spinning with questions and possibilities. The mysterious message replayed in my head, each word echoing with both hope and dread. "You don't know the whole story. Meet me tomorrow. I have proof." I didn't know who had sent it or what I was about to walk into, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. I owed it to Daniel, and, if I was honest to myself, to see this through. The next morning, I left the house early, my heart pounding as I drove to the address the message had provided. A small cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place where secrets could be whispered without fear of being overheard. I arrived a few minutes early, scanning the room for a familiar face. My hands shook as I wrapped them around a mug of coffee, trying to steady myself. A few minutes later, Sarah, Emily's old friend from college, slipped into the seat across from me. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder before leaning in. "I'm sorry to drag you into this," she whispered, "but you deserve to know the truth." I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I listened, barely breathing, as Sarah began to unravel the story. Emily, it turned out, had been living a double life for months. The man from the photos, Alex, wasn't just a co-worker. He was her lover. They'd met at a conference the previous year, and what started as a flirtation had quickly turned into something more. Emily had been traveling to see him, using work as an excuse, and even creating fake business trips to cover her tracks. But that wasn't all. Sarah slid a folder across the table, her hands trembling. Inside were copies of emails, hotel receipts, and even a second phone bill, one Emily had kept hidden from Daniel. There were messages between Emily and Alex, full of plans and promises, and even discussions about money. My stomach twisted as I realized the extent of the deception. Emily had been siphoning money from the joint account she shared with Daniel, transferring small amounts at a time to a secret account she'd opened in her maiden name. The humiliation was overwhelming. I felt foolish for ever trusting her, for welcoming her into our family with open arms. Every kind word, every shared laugh now felt like a lie. But as Sarah continued, humiliation gave way to something else, anger. Righteous, burning anger. How dare she do this to Daniel? How dare she betray not just his love, but our entire family's trust? Sarah's voice shook as she finished. I tried to talk her out of it. I told her she was playing with fire, but she just laughed. She said she deserved to be happy, no matter who got hurt. I sat there, stunned, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. I wanted to storm out, to confront Emily and demand answers, but I knew I needed to be careful. This wasn't just about infidelity. There were financial crimes, lies upon lies, and a web of deceit that could ruin Daniel's life if it all came crashing down. As I drove home, my mind raced with questions. Should I tell Daniel everything? Should I let him see the evidence? Let him decide what to do? Or should I protect him, shield him from the worst of it, and hope that Emily would come clean on her own? The moral dilemma tore at me. I wanted justice, but I also wanted to spare my son more pain. I thought of the boy who used to bring me wildflowers, the man who still called me when he needed comfort. How could I be the one to shatter his world? But as I pulled into the driveway, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. Truth was ugly, but it was his right to know. I gathered the evidence, my hands steady now, my resolve hardening with every step. I would not let Emily's lies destroy us from the inside out. I called Daniel and asked him to come over. He arrived looking exhausted, his eyes red from lack of sleep. I sat him down at the kitchen table, the same place where so many family meals had been shared, and told him everything. I showed him the emails, the receipts, the messages. I watched as the realization dawned on him, as the pieces fell into place. He didn't cry, he didn't shout. He just sat there, silent and still, as if the world had stopped spinning. When I finished, he looked up at me, his voice barely more than a whisper. Why would she do this? I had no answer. All I could do was hold his hand and promise him that he wasn't alone. But just as I thought the worst was over, the story took another turn. As Daniel sat in stunned silence, my phone buzzed again, another message, this time with a photo attached. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. The photo was of Emily and Alex, but they weren't alone. Standing beside them, smiling as if he belonged, was someone I recognized instantly, my husband's old business partner, Mark. He'd been a family friend for years, always showing up at our barbecues, always eager to help with odd jobs around the house. I stared at the image, my mind reeling. What was Mark doing with Emily and Alex? Why was he involved? The message was simple. You're not the only one she's been lying to. Mark knows everything. A fresh wave of betrayal crashed over me. This wasn't just an affair. This was a conspiracy, a web of secrets that stretched further than I'd ever imagined. Mark had been in our home, at our table, laughing with us while hiding the truth. The realization was almost too much to bear. I looked at Daniel, who was still staring at the evidence in front of him, and I knew that our fight for the truth was far from over. The stakes had just been raised, and the next steps would determine not just the future of my son's marriage, but the very fabric of our family. As the sun set outside, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor, I felt a new sense of purpose rising within me. I would not let these lies define us. I would fight for my son, for our family, and for the truth, no matter how deep the betrayal ran. I spent the next day in a haze, the weight of what I'd learned pressing down on me like a stone. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo Emily, Alex, and Mark standing together as if they had nothing to hide. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Mark had been part of our lives for years. He'd held Daniel as a baby, toasted at our anniversary parties, and now he was tangled up in this web of lies. I knew I couldn't let it go. I had to confront him, to look him in the eye and demand the truth. I gathered every piece of evidence I had, Sarah's folder, the emails, the bank statements, the damning photo. My hands shook as I placed them in a manila envelope, but my resolve was stronger than my fear. I called Mark and asked him to meet me at the park, a neutral place where I could keep my emotions in check. He agreed, his voice as friendly as ever, as if nothing had changed. When I arrived, Mark was already there, sitting on a bench beneath the old oak tree where Daniel used to play as a child. For a moment I hesitated, remembering all the good times, the trust I'd placed in him. But then I thought of Daniel's pain, the look in his eyes when he realized how deeply he'd been betrayed. I squared my shoulders and walked over. "Mark," I said, my voice steady, "we need to talk." He looked up, his smile faltering when he saw the envelope in my hand. "What's this about?" I sat down beside him, keeping my distance. "I know about Emily, I know about Alex, and I know you're involved. I want to hear it from you. Why? How could you do this to us?" For a moment he said nothing, then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think," he began, but I cut him off. "Don't lie to me, Mark. I have proof. I know about the money, the trips, the meetings. I know you've been helping Emily cover her tracks. Why? What did you get out of it?" He looked away, shame flickering across his face. "Emily came to me for help. She said she was unhappy that Daniel was never home, that she felt trapped. I thought I was doing her a favor, helping her get her life together. I didn't know about Alex at first, but by the time I found out, it was too late. I was in too deep." His words stung, but I pressed on. "And the money, the secret accounts." He shook his head. "I never touched a dime. That was all Emily. She told me she needed help moving things around, that it was just temporary. I should have said no. I should have told you, but I didn't want to get involved in your family's problems." I stared at him, anger and disappointment warring inside me. "You were already involved, Mark. You were supposed to be our friend." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I stood, clutching the envelope to my chest. "Sorry isn't enough. You need to come clean. Daniel deserves the truth from all of you." He nodded, defeated. "I'll talk to him, I promise." I left the park with my heart pounding, unsure if I could trust Mark to do the right thing. I drove home, rehearsing what I would say to Daniel, how I would break the news that the betrayal ran even deeper than we'd thought. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from more pain, but I knew he needed to hear it all. When I got home, I found Daniel sitting at the kitchen table, the evidence I'd shown him the day before spread out in front of him. He looked up as I entered, his face pale but determined. "Mom," he said quietly, "I went to see Mark." My breath caught. "You did," he nodded. "I had to know for myself. I confronted him. He told me everything." I sat down across from him, searching his face for signs of anger or heartbreak. But what I saw surprised me. There was pain, yes, but also a strange sense of calm. "I'm done, Mom," he said, his voice steady. "I'm done with the lies, the secrets. I'm done letting other people decide what my life should look like. I'm going to talk to Emily. I'm going to end this." Tears pricked my eyes, but I held them back. "Are you sure? You don't have to do this alone." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I know, but I need to do it my way." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, I realized that Daniel was stronger than I'd ever given him credit for. He wasn't the broken boy I'd feared he'd become. He was a man, ready to face the truth, no matter how painful. But as he stood to leave, my phone buzzed again, another message, this time from Emily herself. "I need to talk. There's something you don't know about Alex and about me." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. The story wasn't over yet. There was still one more secret waiting to be revealed. The days that followed were some of the darkest I have ever known. Daniel, once so steady and full of light, became a shadow of himself. He barely spoke, moving through the house like a ghost, his eyes hollow and red, rimmed. I tried to reach him, to offer comfort, but every attempt seemed to push him further away. The pain of betrayal had settled deep in his bones, and I could see him wrestling with not just Emily's lies, but my own silence. One evening, as I set a plate of food in front of him, he finally snapped. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Mom?" His voice was raw, trembling with hurt and accusation. "How long did you know? How many times did you look me in the eye and say nothing?" I opened my mouth to explain, to tell him how I'd wanted to protect him, how I'd been afraid of making things worse. But the words caught in my throat. Nothing I could say would erase the fact that I had kept secrets, too. I had become part of the web of lies, even if my intentions were good. "I'm sorry, Daniel," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I just wanted to spare you more pain." He shook his head, pushing his chair back with a harsh scrape. "You should have trusted me. I'm not a child. I deserve to know the truth." His words cut deep, and for the first time I wondered if I had truly failed him. The guilt was suffocating. I watched as he stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, and I felt utterly alone. The fallout spread quickly. Emily's betrayal became the talk of our small town, and soon everyone seemed to have an opinion. Some relatives called to offer sympathy, but others were less kind. My sister accused me of meddling, of driving a wedge between Daniel and Emily. Old friends avoided me at the grocery store, their eyes full of judgment and whispered gossip. Even at church, I felt the weight of their stares, the silent question, "How could you let this happen?" I tried to hold on to hope, to believe that time would heal these wounds, but every day the distance between Daniel and me seemed to grow. He moved out, staying with a friend across town, and stopped answering my calls. The house felt emptier than ever, every room echoing with memories of happier times. I wandered from room to room, clutching old photos, wondering where it had all gone wrong. Yet in the midst of my despair, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, as I sat alone on the porch, a neighbor I barely knew stopped by. Mrs. Carter, a widow who lived 2 doors down, brought over a plate of cookies and sat beside me in silence. After a while, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "I heard what happened," she said softly. "People can be cruel, but you did what you thought was right. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself." Her kindness cracked something open in me. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry, really cry without shame or fear. Mrs. Carter just sat with me, her presence a quiet reminder that I wasn't as alone as I felt. Word spread, and soon other women from the neighborhood began to reach out. Some shared their own stories of betrayal and heartbreak, their voices full of empathy and understanding. They brought casseroles, sent cards, and invited me for coffee. Slowly, I began to feel the warmth of community, a gentle reassurance that life could go on, even after everything had fallen apart. It wasn't the kind of hope I'd imagined, not the neat, happy ending I'd once dreamed of, but it was real. It was enough to keep me going, to remind me that even in the darkest moments, there are people who care, who understand, who will stand by you when the world feels like it's crumbling. As I watched the sun set over the quiet street, I realized that shattered illusions could sometimes make room for something new, something honest and true. And though my heart was still heavy, I knew I wasn't alone, not anymore. In the weeks that followed, I learned that healing is not a straight line. Some days, the pain of everything that had happened would hit me like a wave, threatening to pull me under. But other days, I found myself breathing a little easier, feeling a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, life could be beautiful again. It was the women in my life who helped me find my footing. Mrs. Carter continued to check in, sometimes with a plate of cookies, sometimes with nothing but a listening ear. The ladies from church invited me to join their book club, and though I was hesitant at first, I found comfort in their laughter and the easy way they shared their own stories of loss and survival. I realized I wasn't the only one who had been blindsided by betrayal, who had questioned her own worth, who had wondered if she'd ever feel whole again. Slowly, I began to reclaim the pieces of myself I'd lost. I started gardening again, letting my hands sink into the earth, finding peace in the simple act of nurturing something new. I took long walks, letting the rhythm of my footsteps quiet my mind. I even signed up for a painting class at the community center, surprising myself with how much joy I found in creating something just for me. But the hardest part was reaching out to Daniel. I knew he was still hurting, still wrestling with anger and grief. For a while, our conversations were stilted, full of awkward silences and unfinished sentences, but I refused to give up. I sent him little notes, reminders that I loved him, that I was proud of him, that I was here whenever he was ready. One afternoon, he showed up at my door, looking tired but softer around the edges. We sat on the porch, watching the world go by, and for the first time in a long while, he let his guard down. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. "I know you were just trying to protect me. I needed time to figure things out." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "We both did, sweetheart, but we're still here. We're still family." We talked for hours, sharing our pain, our regrets, and our hopes for the future. I encouraged him to seek justice, not out of vengeance, but out of a need for closure and healing. I reminded him that he deserved honesty, respect, and love, and that it was okay to demand those things, even if it meant letting go of the past. Together, we made a plan. Daniel would meet with a lawyer to sort out the financial mess Emily had left behind. He started seeing a counselor, working through the tangled emotions that had threatened to consume him. This is where awareness from previous steps becomes critical, but I also made a promise to myself. I would not lose myself in his pain. I would keep building my own life, brick by brick, day by day. The shift from despair to resilience was slow, but it was real. I saw it in the way Daniel began to smile again, in the way I started to look forward to each new day. We were both scarred, but we were also stronger, wiser, more compassionate, more determined to live honestly and fully. If you're listening to my story and you're in the middle of your own storm, I want you to know this. You are stronger than you think. You can survive heartbreak, betrayal, and loss. You can rise from the ashes, not as the person you were before, but as someone braver and more whole. And as Daniel and I sat together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a quiet sense of peace. We had been through the fire, but we were still standing, and that I realized was enough. Justice, I learned, doesn't always come swiftly or in the way you expect. But it does come, especially when you refuse to let fear or shame silence you. In the months that followed, Daniel and I stood side by side as the truth about Emily's double life came to light. With the evidence we'd gathered, Daniel's lawyer helped him reclaim what was rightfully his savings, his dignity, and, most importantly, his peace of mind. Emily tried to deny everything at first, but the facts were undeniable. The financial records, the messages, the testimony from friends. One by one, the lies unraveled. She was held accountable, both legally and socially. The community that once whispered behind my back now saw the truth for themselves. Some even apologized for doubting us, and I realized that standing up for what's right, even when you're scared, is always worth it. For Daniel, closure didn't come overnight. There were still hard days, moments when the pain of betrayal would sneak up on him. But with time, and with the support of those who truly cared, he began to heal. He found strength in honesty, in facing the truth head on, and in letting go of what he could not change. I watched him grow into a man who knew his worth, who refused to let someone else's choices define his future. As for me, I learned to trust my instincts again. I learned that a mother's intuition is a gift, not a flaw, and that protecting your family sometimes means asking hard questions and risking temporary pain for lasting truth. I learned that self-worth isn't measured by what others think of you, but by how you stand up for yourself and those you love. If you're listening to my story and you've ever doubted yourself or felt alone in your struggles, I want you to know you are not alone. Your voice matters, your pain is real, and your healing is possible. Don't let anyone make you feel small for trusting your gut or fighting for justice. Even in the darkest times, there is a way forward, Our family isn't the same as it once was, but in many ways we're stronger. We've learned that love isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about standing together, even when the truth hurts. It's about choosing honesty, courage, and compassion, day after day. If you've faced betrayal or heartbreak, I invite you to share your story in the comments. Let's lift each other up, remind one another that we are resilient, and that justice and healing are always within reach. Thank you for listening, and remember, you are stronger than you know.